What's going on, guys? In this tutorial I'm going to be walking you through how to use the illustration photo effect for Photoshop. So this is the effect that the Photoshop action will create on your photos. So here was the original photo and here is the result. If you want to see more examples, just check out the first link in the description below. Alright, let's jump into Photoshop. Now with this Photoshop action you can use transparent or non-transparent images. For this example I'm using a transparent image here. The important thing to remember is that before creating the effect is that you only have one layer in your layer panel. So don't have multiple layers like this and then run the action, otherwise you'll get errors. So just the one layer. Now this can be called whatever you want, that doesn't matter. The important thing is that we now load the Photoshop action. So if you go to the window menu and go to actions, the actions panel should pop up. And if you click on this icon here, and then go down to load actions, you want to navigate to where you unzip the file and you're looking for illustration photo effect by Sevenstyles.atn. So double click on that and then the action will appear in a folder here called illustration photo effect by Sevenstyles. Now another way you can load the action is simply to navigate to where you unzip the file, which is here, and I can just double click on this ATN file and it will automatically load up in Photoshop. So when you've loaded up the Photoshop action, twirl open the folder, and the action that creates the illustration is this one here, the very first one called Create Illustration. Now an important thing to remember with this folder is that you can't rename it. If you rename this folder, the action will break, so it's important you keep that as it is. So to create the effect, all you need to do is select Create Illustration, and down the bottom of the Actions panel, just click this play button, okay? And that's all you need to do. So the action takes roughly 1 minute to complete. So I will just skip the video ahead and we'll then go through all the layers. Alright, the action's finished. Now before I go through all these layers, I'll just mention that in the description below I've got time codes for different sections of this tutorial. So if you're only interested in a particular part of this tutorial, just make sure you check out those time codes. So let's just collapse the actions panel for the moment. We'll definitely come back to this because there's a lot more we can do here. So we'll just use these double arrows to minimize that. Now what I always like to do, and it's a good habit to get into, is when using Photoshop actions, when they complete, generally all the folders are all expanded. So to neaten that up, just hold down Control Alt or Command Option and click on this arrow here next to the illustration folder. Click on that and then release the keys and then twirl that back open and everything is collapsed. So what you'll notice is that when the action's finished, this top layer is selected in purple and it's called Finished Illustration, Delete to Edit Layers. So what I've done here is basically, for your default result, I've merged everything onto one layer and enhanced the results. So if I zoom in here, and if I turn this layer on and off, so you can see the before and after there. So basically what this top layer does, it takes a snapshot of all the working layers here, puts it onto one layer. So if I move this around, you can see it's just one layer, and it goes over all the edges, smooths them and sharpens your overall result. Now this action, there's actually an action in here that does this for you, okay, and this is a really important action. It's called this one here, Finalize and Enhance Illustration. So if you want to edit the layers, it's important, and I've just got in brackets here, delete to edit layers. Just delete this top layer, okay? Now you can go through any of these and start editing your result. But if you're happy with the default result, you can just save that out as it is. Okay, so if you want to edit the layers, delete this, okay? And at any point you're done editing, make sure to run this action here, Finalize and Enhance Illustration. So if I just select this, and you can select any layer here before running it, doesn't matter. So I just select this, click play, take about 5 seconds, and what it'll do, it will recreate that layer at the top of the layer panel here. So you can see it here, and it will just really enhance your overall result. So make sure to run that action when you're finished editing. Okay, so I'm going to go down the layer order from top to bottom here, but like I said, you can just jump to different sections in the time codes below. So let's just hide this actions panel for the moment, and we're going to delete this top layer because I want to edit the layers. Okay, let's zoom out, Control 0 or Command 0 to zoom out. So if I just collapse the folder here, so everything is inside this illustration folder here, okay, and we have the background color below here. So let's just turn that on for this tutorial, but you don't need to use this, but if you want to, you can just select that. If you want to change color, you can do that here. So I might just quickly change the color while we're here, something like that. Okay, and you can see here that I have put a mask on the folder here, and if I hold down Alt or Option and click on that mask, you can see that I've restricted everything within this folder to only appear within the area in white, which is your subject. Okay, so anything you place inside this folder will only be visible within this white area range. So if you import background elements, you want to put them outside of the folder here, so they are visible outside of your subject. But there's a section I'll get to soon on importing background graphics. Alright, so let's go inside here. And the very first one, simple hue and saturation adjustment layer. So you can just double click on this layer and affect the overall color saturation if you want to do that. Pretty simple adjustment layer. The next one down is overall color vibrance. So this one here, you can enhance the vibrance with this slider here. Now, just by default, I've added a little bit of vibrance. So just keep that in mind that I have enhanced that just a little bit. Okay, this layer below simplify colors. So if you double click on this adjustment layer here, so this is the properties for, it's a posterized adjustment layer. And if you adjust these levels, so I'm going to exaggerate this, I'm going to drag this all the way down to 2, okay, and I'm going to select 2, and I'm just going to use the wheel on the mouse here to go up levels, so you can see 3, 4, 5, and as I increase the levels, it starts to add more color back into your image, okay. So if these colors appear too strong, okay, you can just select the hue and saturation adjustment layer here and drag down the saturation, okay. But the point of this layer is if you want to experiment with limiting colors, you can use this here to do that. Okay, so by default, I've got this set to 30, so it's not really noticeable. It's pretty much all the colors from your original photo. And if you drag this all the way up, it really has no effect, but it's much more visible as you drag it down. So experiment with that one. Now the next folder down is color, and I've got in brackets here change folder opacity. So by default here the color folder is turned off. So if I turn this on, okay, you can see it's had a little effect. Now by default I have set the folder opacity to 40%. So if I just turn it to 100%, so we can see this clearly, you can see the color there. Now if you open the folder, this is the way I've set up the coloring. So I've split it into six different sections, which start from the shadows and work their way to the midtones up to the highlights. So for example, you can select a, let's say the shadow zone 2, and if you double click on this colored box, you can then pick a new color, okay, just like that. And you don't need to use all the zones. So for example, I could turn all these off, which hides all the color, and let's just say I want to just use shadow zone 2, so I can just apply color to that area, okay, or I could turn on these 3 and then experiment with changing colors there like that. Alright, now the reason why I've got in brackets here change folder opacity is that you don't need to use the colors at 100% opacity. You can just drag, so click on the word opacity here, drag that down to 0%, and I can just use a little bit of that color there, okay. Now if you open the actions panel, you'll notice that in this section there are 30 color options that I've set up, okay. So if you just select one of these and click play on the action, what this will do, I'll just turn this folder opacity back up so we can see that more clearly. Let's just select number 2 now, click play. What it's doing, I've just set up some presets here that when you play them, they go down through each color, each zone, and recolors them. So you can see that there. So you can just experiment with some of these presets, but I'm sure you want to probably color these how you want. So experiment with that. Alright, so let's collapse and hide the color folder for the moment, and we'll just hide the actions panel. So the next folder down is called Posterization 1. So if I turn this folder on and off, you can clearly see the effect there. So this is the primary folder that creates those clear divisions between sections of your photo. Now the way I've set this up is similar to the color folder in that I've split it into 6 different zones, the same zones as the color. So, and these are all, they don't affect the color, they will only affect the luminosity. So for example, if I double click on Shadow Zone 2 again, and if I pick a color, it doesn't change it red, it only affects the luminosity of that zone. Okay, so you can experiment with changing these, but I think most of the time you'll probably keep these as the defaults, but they're there to experiment with. Now, the layer below, Posterization 2, I've got in brackets here, hide Posterization 1 folder. So Posterization 1 will split your image into 6 different zones, but Posterization 2 allows you to split it into a lot more. But I found that it's not as clean a result as Posterization 1, but because there's a lot fewer divisions here, you might want to use number 2 here. And the way number 2 works, if you just double click on it, it's a posterized adjustment layer here. So just by default, I've got this set to 10, but if you just change this number here, you can see how it creates more or less divisions. Okay, so you can use that. If you find that you've run the action and there is just not enough detail in your overall result, try Posterization 1, but there are more layers below which will help sort of enhance definition in your illustration. Okay, so moving on down here, we have adjust illustration contrast. So this is just a simple curves adjustment layer. So for anyone that's new to Photoshop, the way this works is simply you have your shadows down here, and up the top here are the highlights. So if you want to say brighten up the shadows, you can grab this handle and bring this up. You can see that that's brighten up the shadows, or if you want to dull down the highlights, you can bring this down. So I usually like to start off with a click here to create an anchor point in the middle, and then you can sort of play around with the curves here to quickly affect the overall contrast of your illustration. Okay, and you can click this arrow here to reset it quickly. Alright, these 3 folders below is where you can further control the highlight, midtones, and shadows of your illustration. So let's go inside the highlight control folder here and take a look. So there are 2 layers in here. The first one is edge highlights, and I've got in brackets here to adjust the slider, and the primary highlights below. So the way these work is if you just double click on them, okay, it'll bring up the levels properties here. Now if you want, I recommend when using this action is to perhaps move the properties panel into the sidebar here. So as you're sort of clicking down, it just pops up right here and you can adjust it. So if you have your properties panel, say, over here or something like this, it's probably better to just drag this and put it into here, but that's totally up to you. So I'll just flip that back open. So edge highlights 1. So with this one, if you drag this handle here up, you can see what that's doing. That's brightening up along the edges or any obvious edges in your illustration. Okay, now where you can see this more clearly working is if you select the mask here and hold down Alt or Option and click on it, you can see that the area in white is where that level adjustment layer will affect, and everywhere in black it won't affect. So you can see that this is the area that it will brighten up. You can also experiment with like dragging it down here, which will darken areas, which could create a result that you like. Okay, now a little tip with this is that if you, let's just say we boost this up, but I'm only interested in say this little highlight that it's added here on the shoulder. So what you could do is select the mask here on the highlight control folder, hit B, okay, and so just grab a brush. Now a brush that I recommend is just the default brushes for this action when brushing onto mask. So if you hit B, then right click, okay, bring up the brushes panel. You can load the general brushes just by going to this icon and going to append default brushes. Just click OK, and that'll just load Photoshop's default brushes here. You don't need any of these, so I'm just going to shift select these and just go delete groups. Okay, and I've already loaded this up, so I'll just delete that one as well, and just select this first one here. Okay, so if I select the mask here and I turn this to black, if you hit X on the keyboard, that flips it from black to white, which is great for when you're working with masks. It's just a quick shortcut for that. So I want to hide what this layer did on the face. So I'm just going to select the mask, start brushing black, and this will hide it. Okay, so now when I turn this layer on and off, you can see it's affecting everywhere but the face. Okay, so this folder below is the primary highlights. So if I hold down Alt or Option and click on this mask, you can see that these are the main highlights in your subject. So you can just, again, just double click on this layer and just drag these handles around, and you can see that it's affecting that. Now you can see that it's not affecting her face because we actually masked that out on this folder here. So if I hold down Alt or Option, click on that, you can see that everything inside this folder, anything in black, it's not going to be affected. So what you could do, so let's just fill this mask in white. So I'm just going to hit Control Backspace or Command Backspace, and that will fill the mask in with the background color here. All right, so which is white. So if you want to, let's say that we just want to mask out this area on the face just specifically with this layer and not apply the mask to the overall folder. What you can do is select the edge highlights, hit Control or Command G to group it. Okay, now select this icon here, which will add a mask. So now we have this this edge highlights layer within this folder. So now I can select this mask, hit B, make sure black is my active color because I want to hide what's in this mask. I'll brush that away. So now when we use the primary highlight slider, it will affect the entire photo because we have restricted the edge highlights to not be visible on the face. But before, we restricted the entire folder and everything in it to not be visible on the face. So if you want to control specifically where these individual sliders affect, put it into a group, Control or Command G, apply a mask to it, and then start brushing black or white where you want that layer to affect your illustration. All right, undo that. So the next one down is the midtone control. So similar to the highlights control, but there's just one layer in here. So you can use this slider here to adjust the midtones of your illustration. Next one down is the shadows control. Now this is set up similar to the highlight control, where it's got a edge shadows adjustment slider here. So you can double click on this and drag these handles, and this will more target the edges of your illustration. So you can see that there. And then you have the primary one below, which affects the main shadow areas of your illustration. Okay, so if I jump into the mask of these, you can see where it's affecting. So hold down Alt or Option, click on that mask. So you can see the edge shadows layer will darken or lighten this area in white, whereas the primary shadows will affect these areas. Okay. All right, the next folder down is the black edge outline. So if I turn this folder on and off, you can see that they are the lines that you'll see running around areas of definition in your illustration. Now, what I like to do first off is if there are any black lines interfering with, say you have a more of a distant person in your illustration, and there might be some black lines over, say, areas of their eyes or nose or mouth that you want to get rid of, just select the mask and hit B, make sure black is your active color. You can hit X to reset that, and just brush black. If I zoom in here, just brush black over this mask folder, and that will hide any black lines in that area. Okay, so if we go inside this folder here, let's zoom back here. So I've set up 3 different layers here. So the one that's on by default is this bottom one, Edge Outlines Brightness, and I've got in brackets here again, Adjust Slider. So this is another just a levels adjustment layer. So you can drag this to the right, which will darken the lines. Might be a bit hard to see there, but they're darkening. Or you can drag them to the left, which will lighten them, basically make them invisible. Okay. This one here, if you turn this one on, this will add a bit more thickness. I'll just disable this mask for the moment. I'll just hold down Shift and click on that mask. That just puts a red X to it, which disables it for the moment. So we can just see the lines on the face. So you can see if I turn it on and off, you can again use this slider to make it even darker. Okay. And then you've got this top one here, use single color. So if I turn these two off, and turn this one on, okay, this will allow you to create a different colored line basically. So you can just double click on that box and then pick a new color if you want to move away from black. Okay. So the next two layers down in gray, we have increased definition brush mask and decreased definition / smooth edges brush mask. So if you want to, so let's just zoom in a bit here. If you want to increase the definition, say again you have a distant subject that you want to bring more definition, say back into the face that might be lost, what you want to do is select the mask here, okay, and hit B and brush whites into areas where you want to increase the definition. Now because this is already quite defined, there's no real lost features. This example won't really demonstrate that well, but zoom right in here, undo that. So if I start brushing over the face here with white, it's actually increasing the definition more back to the original image. So it's a handy layer to have if there is definition loss that you want to bring back. Okay. Now this layer here, decreased definition, will do the opposite. Okay, so you can see that these two layers, the masks are in black. So it's basically, by default, I've completely hidden it. So if I turn that layer on and off, it's got no effect. But if I hold down Shift to disable it temporarily, you can see if I turn it on and off, you can see what that's doing. So if I disable the decreased definition one, you'll see that it hides a lot of the definition. Okay, so if there are areas of your illustration that you want to decrease the definition, just select that mask, make sure white is active, and start brushing over those areas. Okay, but what it also does, if I zoom back in, it will smooth over any, if there are any rough edges in your illustration, you can just brush onto that mask. So you can see this little bit here. If I wanted to smooth this out, I can just select that mask and brush white over that area, and that will smooth it. Okay, most of your edges will already be smooth, but if there are some that you want to try and smooth out more, just brush onto that mask. Okay, so by masking out black edge outlines, it might be distorting facial features in combination with increasing the definition in that same area, you can really enhance the definition in that particular area. Okay, so that's a really important one to remember. All right, the next one down is the back-end image. Now I've just got in brackets here, don't delete or rename. The reason why you don't delete it or rename it is that these actions that we're getting to in a moment rely on this layer being there and also being called exactly that. Okay, so even if you add in one letter, it will break these three actions. So it's important to leave that one where it is and not delete it. So here is your original image. So for example, if you want to run the action again, just drag this original image outside of the folder, and then delete the illustration folder, delete the background color, and then there's your original image, and you can run the action again. So just remember that I have placed it down here if you need to access it. So let's say you want a thick edge black outline just around the perimeter of your subject. Okay, so nowhere inside, just on the perimeter. So the way you could do that is copying your original image, because this is the one with the transparency. Okay, so if you hold down Alt or Option, you want to drag that up just below the edge outline folder. Okay, so you can see there's our original image. You can see why all the edges are going bumpy, because it has all the original details in it. Okay, but what you want to do is select the fill here and just drag that down to 0%. So basically we've hidden it. Next, what you want to do is double click on this layer. This will bring up the layer style panel, and you want to select stroke. Okay, and select the size to whatever you want the thickness to be, and you can select the position to be outside or inside. Now just be careful. If you select it to outside, the reason why that's not showing is because the folder here, don't forget, is restricted to that area in white. Okay, so we're trying to expand this effect beyond where this folder is masked to, so that's why it's not visible. So you might want to set it to inside. Okay, so you can see that there. And yeah, just adjust that to what you want. Let's just go there at 10. Click OK. Now you can see here that it's darkened because it's quite a feathered selection here on the hair. So if you apply a mask, okay, select it, hit B, grab our brush out, make sure black is active because we want to hide this. So if I start brushing here, you'll notice that it's moving the black edge outline up because you can see that this is the new area that it's going to be applying this stroke to. Okay, it's going to ignore this area, but it's going to be applying it down here. But I don't want that. I just want to get rid of that black edge outline altogether. So what you want to do is, again, put this in a group. So Control or Command G, apply a mask. Okay, I'm just going to disable this mask that I brushed on before. Now when I select the group mask and brush black, it will completely hide it. Okay, so that's just a little tip. If you do have feathered edges and you just want to stroke around everywhere but that area, that's how you need to do it. So next we're going to go through how to add some distortion to these posterization lines you can see running throughout your illustration, just to add a bit of variation. So you can see in this example here, down through the arms, you can see these extra lines and through the face. So the way to do that is if you open the Actions panel, you'll see this action here called Create Edge Styles. Now all you need to do is select it and click play. Okay. Now when you play it, there's just a message here, and I'll go over. I won't read this. I'll talk through what's going to happen. Basically, it's going to create a folder towards the bottom here that will allow us that will create several different options for different edge styles. The action will take around 2 minutes to complete. So all you need to do here is click continue, and so I'll fast forward the video now to get to the result. Alright, so you can see that it's created a folder down the bottom here in purple called Edge Styles. So I'm just going to hide the Actions panel. Now if you open this Edge Styles folder, okay, you can see that I've created a bunch of 10 different edge styles, and the way these work is similar to all these other layers where it's just a levels adjustment layer. So if you just double click on one of these, and if you grab any one of these three handles and move them around, you can see it starts to add distortion to those edges. Okay, so you can just go down one by one and just adjust these and see if you like any, basically. Now don't forget that that technique of grouping them first if you want to isolate say a particular style to only appear, let's just say, in the arms here. So for example, if I double click on this and I say drag it down, let's just say I just want this effect to be on the arms. You can either use the Edge Styles folder to mask out everything else, but don't forget that will mask out everything. So basically if you use any of these other edge styles, they won't appear in the face. So thin swells 4, I'm going to group that, Control Command G, apply a mask, and I'm just going to mask away by brushing black into the mask to hide the face. Okay, so now that is just affecting that area. Okay, but we'll just leave that on for the moment, just apply it everywhere. And what I like to do is when I'm going down through these, because it can be a bit confusing as like remembering which one you like if you're going down one by one, what I like to do is just basically mark one in different colors. So if I'm interested in this one, I might just mark it orange, and then this one's my second favorite, I might mark that one in orange as well. So now I've got a reference of my two favorites, and you can combine them as well. So if I want, say, just a little bit of that one and say number 4 as well, so they will basically overlap now. Yeah, so experiment with these. It's a pretty fun one to see what results you can come up with. I might just turn off this one because I liked just number 4 on its own. Okay. Now an important thing to remember about this Edge Styles folder is that it must be above the backend image Don't Delete or Rename folder. So if I drag this below this layer, you'll see that it does nothing. Okay. So it's important that sits above there. So as part of that message that popped up when you played that action, okay, I'm just basically saying that it needs to be above there, just as a reminder. So just cancel that. So if you've run the action and say if you've been creating more layers down the bottom here and the Edge Styles folder is below, just make sure it's above. Okay, next let's take a look at the Create Colored Edge Dashes effect. So select that and click play. Now this one takes about 30 seconds or so to complete, and it will create a folder at the top of the layer stack here. So I'll just fast forward a bit to get to the completion of that. Oh, it's done already. So it only took about 10 seconds. So you can see it creates a folder in yellow at the top here. Okay, now if you twirl this open, first let's zoom in so you can see what it's done. So you can see around areas of your illustration, it's added colored dashed lines. So you can see if I turn it off and then back on, so you can see that there. So you can experiment with this, and if you go inside, there are two different folders, edge dashes 1 and 2. So if you twirl them open, you can see the two different colors. So edge dash is one color. I can double click on this and change that to another color. Okay. And again, if you want to mask out, say if there's some dashes that have appeared, so I don't want that green one over an eye, I can just select the mask of the folder, hit B, grab the brush, make sure black is active because I want to hide it, and brush that away. Okay, so just experiment with that one. And the last one here is create dot and lines pattern. Okay, so you can just, if you want to create some dotted textures over your illustration or some extra line patterns, just select this one and click play. And this one will take about 30 seconds, I'm sure, so I'll just skip ahead to the completion of that. So after you've run the create dot and lines pattern, it will create a blue folder down the bottom here called dots and lines. Let's hide this. Now if you go inside this folder, there are two subfolders, dots and lines. So if let's just open them both. So by default, I've got them turned off. So if you just click on one and turn it on, you'll see that what that does, it creates a dotted texture throughout, more so around the edges, the contours of your illustration. Okay, now if I select this mask and hold down Alt or Option and click on it to view what it's doing. So anywhere in white is where the texture will appear. Okay, and black it won't appear. So if you want to, let's just say I want to add some dots down here, some more dots, I can just brush white onto that mask. So I've hit B, grab the brush, hit X to flip that to white, and if I start brushing here, I can now bring more dot pattern into that area. Okay, now if I hit X, flip to black, I can erase it. Okay, so not just restricted to where the default area is, you can brush more in. I've also got in brackets here opacity. So by default, I've set these to 40% opacity, but you can increase this if you want to make it a bit more apparent, or decrease it. So the one below is dots, large, light. So this is pretty much the same, but lighter dots. So you can combine them both to see what effect you can come up with. And this one here is dots, small. So these are really small dots. Creates a very fine texture. Okay. Again, you can brush onto that mask so anywhere it's not appearing, you can have it appear, and again, the opacity. So the waves, so if I turn this one on, you can see what that's doing. Okay, and then waves 2, it's pretty much the same, but it flows in different directions. Okay, you can turn them both on if you want to create more of a sort of checkered result in areas. So yeah, experiment with those. So next we're going to go through importing background graphics and how to color them. But before that, I might try and see what's causing this little bit of darkness on her eye there. So I might just turn the black edge outlines file on off and see if it's that one. Could be the shadows control. Yep, it's that one there. So all I need to do is select the mask and hit B and brush black, and that's gone. So if you get any artifacts, or like I said, any distortion over areas that you really want to be clear, a good way to do that, to see what folder is affecting it, is just to quickly turn it on and off to see which one it is, and then just brushing black onto the mask like that. Alright, so let's zoom out. And so to import background graphics, what you want to do, let's just hide the illustration folder for the moment. And we want to put it outside of the illustration folder because, like I said, everything inside this folder is restricted to the transparency of your original image. Okay, so select the background color layer and you want to go to File, Place Embedded. Now you can, of course, use your own background graphics. I have just included some very basic shapes here that you can experiment with. So let's just go for, let's say, this one here. Okay, so when you've imported it, It's got a bounding box around it, so you can just grab these corners and scale them up, place it where you want. Okay, hit enter, and now I can move this around just like that. So you can see here is the texture here. So let's just say I want to recolor this. So there's obviously a few ways you can do that, but what I like to do is create a solid color adjustment layer. So down the bottom here, select solid color up the top here, and let's just grab any color for the moment. And you can see by adding a solid color, it's basically got the same effect as a background color. It's filled in everything. But what we want to do, by holding down Alt or Option, move your mouse between the two layers. You can see there's a little square icon with an arrow. Click on that, and that will ensure that this solid color layer will only be filling the layer below. Okay, it's clipping it to the layer below. So now I can double click on this box and grab another color, just like that. Say I want just like a really faint, something like that. Click OK. All right. So let's say I've tried this texture. You know, it doesn't really suit it. Let's try another one. So what you can do is just right click on this and go to replace contents. Okay, now I can just navigate to a different one. So I just grab another one here, and then I can quickly preview another one. All right. So another way, let's just say that, let's go back to the color options here. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on. All right, and I'll, let's just say, let's go color option 2. Let's just say I want to use the colors of color option 2, but you can see it's not affecting the background graphics. It's because, again, that the color folder here is inside the illustration folder, which is restricted to here. So the color isn't going to affect anywhere in black. So if you want to use these same colors for your background texture, what you want to do is just grab the color folder and move it outside of the illustration folder. So now that's going to affect the illustration folder as well as all the layers below. Okay, so if I now change the color here, let's just say I pick a red, see how that's not changing it red? Okay, so if I go down through the tones here, it's actually working with the values that we set up in the color change folder. Okay, so yeah, definitely experiment with this if you want to. That's how you want to do it, if you want to keep the same colors as what's inside the color folder here for your background graphics. Alright, so now let's finalize our illustration. So I might just hide the color folder for the moment. Let's change this back to a green. Alright, so what you want to do is select the finalize and enhance illustration action. Select that, click play. It'll take about 5 seconds, and what it's going to do, it's going to create a new layer up the top here, which is our entire design onto one layer, and it's going to smooth and sharpen our entire illustration. So if I zoom in here, zoom in, if I turn this on and off, you can see that there. So I highly recommend, as I mentioned earlier, to run this action after you finish editing the layers, because it does make it look a lot better. Okay, so now let's have a look at some extra fine tune that we can do in the camera raw filter. So you can find the camera raw filter under filter, camera raw filter, and it should pop up in a second. So there it is. So there's a, whoop, zoom back out. There's a bunch of things you can do in here. So for example, under the basic tab here, let's just zoom right back in, zoom out a little bit. You can do little things like increasing the texture amount. So if I exaggerate this from 100 to negative 100, you can see the result there. So you can add additional sharpening just by increasing that slider there. Clarity will do something similar, okay, where it would aim to pretty much just add a bit more contrast between these sections, which will give it the appearance of being a bit sharper. So if I drag it to the left, you can see that it smooths that out, which is a interesting effect in itself. You can experiment with that one. But what I like to also do in here is click on this box here, and you can browse color profiles. So for example, if I click on the artistic tab, I can just hop, let's zoom back here, I can hover over these, and it will you can apply different color presets. So I usually like to work with modern, and so what you can do with these, if I just click on one, you'll see then a slider appears below, so you can choose the amount that of that effect that you want to apply. So I only say if I only want to apply a little bit, just increase that, and then I can look around for another one. So let's just say I want to apply a bit of number 4. I can click on that one, and now it's going to combine what I applied for modern 1, and I can assign a little bit of color here from modern 4, and that's it. Okay, so that's there's obviously lots of other things you can do in here. So you can go to, say, detail. There's a noise reduction section here, which will aim to smooth out. Most of the noise is pretty much already gone from this effect, but you can experiment with that. Yeah, a bunch of things you can do in here. Let's turn that off. But the primary one I like to jump into are these color profiles, and mixing these can get some really nice color looks. All right, so I'm going to click OK, and it's going to apply those changes, and we are done. That covers pretty much everything you need to know in regards to creating the effect and understanding how each layer and folder affects your illustration. If you're interested in more effects like this, make sure to check out the links below. And if you're stuck and need help using the Photoshop action, make sure to take a look at my support page. You'll also find a link for that below in the description. So thanks for your support, and I hope you enjoy using the action.